I will talk about the legal framework and people's perspective on cybersecurity, and I guess for this kind of crowd, it's perfect to talk about laws and guidelines, and thereby support you to get actually in a perfect mood for then have a safe and good trip home. So what am I explicitly talking about? Two things. First of all, I want to talk about this legislation that Nuno has already brought up, namely the NIS Directive, but don't worry, it's not going too much into details. I will just bring up some headlines that I think will help you to get an idea what the policymakers' perspective is on the topic, and how they see the issue and where they think are the points to get some improvements out of that. And then I will have some slides about recent research that we did to address the topic of privacy and economic effects, and to see how people actually value cybersecurity, in particular when it's related to help them to avoid the loss of personal data. So what are actually the headlines that I would like to share with you? As I already said, first of all, let's go to the NIS Directive. It stands for the Network and Information Systems Security Directive, and it is an approach by the European Commission. Thereby, it's an approach on a relatively high level. It's in force actually since August 2016. Member states have 2 years to actually get that into national law. So by 2018, we will then really see what member states have made out of it. And an important point is that it's actually the first legal provision to address cybersecurity on a European level. And that's pretty important. You may now ask, the cybersecurity issue isn't on the table just for a while. Why has it taken until 2016? Well, cybersecurity and related issues are still on the agenda of national security, and that's, let's say, where a cooperation, transnational cooperation, is still not too easy, even in a community like the European Union. So things have taken some time, but today we are at least somewhere. Actually, that directive, it's important to say, is not specifically made for the energy sector, so the implementation in our sector may not always be very straightforward, may not be always easy, and what they ask from us, and in particular from technology providers and system operators, may not always be, come very natural when you talk about the energy system. So first of all, what actually does the directive want from us? I have just six headlines what they want to establish. First of all, they want that all member states equally have the topic of cybersecurity on their national agendas. And that's what the NIS strategies that they request from member states is made for, to get countries on a table and talk about how they, in their country, want to approach the issue. So it's a very national instrument to have these NIS strategies formulated by the countries, by the member states themselves. Some countries are already pretty advanced, others lag a bit behind. I guess this NIS strategy shall help them to come and develop some kind of homogeneous movement. Then what they actually ask are each nation to develop 3 bodies to deal with cybersecurity. First of all, they ask for a national competent authority, then they ask for a single point of contact, and then for those countries that still don't have, they ask to establish a computer security incident response team. So what is the national competent authority made for? Those is the instrument to monitor the implementation of the directive on a national level, okay? So the competent authority developed in each country is there to see whether everything is brought into national laws that should be. Next thing, the single point of contact, in opposition to the national approach, is made to establish a procedure for transnational cooperation. If there's a security breach somewhere in Germany and there is the risk that this could spread to Austria, then their single point of contact is calling the Austrian single point of contact, and so some liaisons are built and cooperation is institutionalized in some way. Now, these are very strategic groups, I would say. Now let's come to a more operative level, and that's, oh, sorry, that was one too fast. And that's actually when this guy there seems to get to his job and being successful by hacking something. Then you have these computer security incident response teams that are more on an operative level and trying in particular to support the private sector to protect themselves, to prevent such incidents, and in case it's already happening, how to best handle it. So this has been the national efforts, but one of the very big strengths of that directive is that they are fostering cooperation between the member states, and for that purpose, again, we have a strategic group that is the cooperation group that where member states meet and discuss national approaches and where mutual benefits could be achieved through cooperation. And then we have the less strategic and more operational group. That's the network of the national certs, and these are intended again to exchange information and possibly develop cross-border cooperation to improve cybersecurity. So my next slide is pretty much in line with the slide that we've just seen by Nuno. That's exactly, we have some open issues there, and these open issues should be addressed pretty careful in a pretty short time, I guess would be the best. First of all, the directive also asks us to implement security standards, but it does not really tell us how to do it. When the Sparks project was meeting last October with the people that have actually been authoring that directive in Brussels, they were informing us that their idea would be that the industry stands up and develops a standard altogether, but what they more or less, in my opinion, said quite clearly, that we may not expect these kind of minimum standards from a political or policy side. So it's up on the industry here. Then it's not really said how we achieve that common level, how we shall achieve that common level that the directive is asking for between all member states. And then we have one very important point of the directive, and that is, in case of an incident, the national competent authority needs to be informed. That is, when like a data theft on a large scale is recognized on a smart metering level, then the respective grid provider has to report that to his competent authority. We will come to that in a minute, because the directive doesn't really learn us which incidents they want to have reported explicitly, and that seems to be a quite open issue at the moment, leading to a lot of related discussions. And then the directive doesn't really give us an answer who exactly needs to apply. This may be relatively clear for some sectors. In the energy sector, with the huge number and ever increasing number of parties and actors, this seems to be a bit more less clear. We know that they exclude from being obliged the very small entities, but from the national approaches that are currently being developed, we already see that the interpretation there is not very homogeneous, and some countries are interpreting the issues differently than others. So, just one point that I want to go deeper into next, and that is the notification that I was talking about. The directive, as I said, asks that significant disruptive events shall be reported, and they shall be reported to the competent national authority or to the CERT, and only in case that it's important for the prevention or that the attack is still ongoing, then also the public shall be informed. So this notification issue is more or less made to collect and earn experiences. But what actually is a significant disruptive extent, and that's something that has not been clarified in the directive, but what they tell us are factors that should be used to identify whether something is significant or not. And that is actually the number of users and the geographical spread and stuff like that. And I want to go a bit more into detail about economic and societal effects that should be considered when we talk about a significant effect, but it's not made clear what exactly they mean by that. So during the demos, we have already seen a great presentation or demo of how to assess the economic damage in a bottom-up approach by Gerhard Klein-Eidam. And I will now show you a worst-case scenario from a cyber attack that created a huge impact on a very large level. Oh, sorry. And the impact that the attack scenario that will lead us to the economic impacts is the one that Gerhard's demo went terribly wrong, and now we don't only have a problem in Wunsiedel, but we have it actually in the whole of southern Germany and Austria. And the power outage started around 12 and lasts for 7 hours. Then what we try to contribute is a model that allows you on a very simple top-down basis to assess the economic damage that would result from such an incident. That model can easily be accessed as a freeware through the internet. It's on blackout-simulator.com, and there you can simulate your own blackouts and see what would be the economic damage of such an incident if it would spread in the way that you actually define it. And what we see here is that such an incident in Central Europe would create around 1.8 billion euros, and that's actually an amount of money for which you could invest quite significantly into additional security measures. The model also gives you some conclusion about which sectors are most affected, and including a household level, where we also see damages here. So this could be one opportunity to assess how significant a disruptive effect actually is. Now, one more issue that I want to talk to you, that is the societal impact, what could be understood by that. And how we interpret this here is actually the privacy issue. We always hear that the privacy of energy data obviously is something that people care terribly much about. So what we try to identify what is actually terribly much caring about data privacy and to avoid the data theft and the loss of such personal data. To get a real idea of that, we've recruited about 500 Upper Austrian households and did a quite normal survey with them. And finally, we asked them whether they would allow us to access their smart meter data almost real time for a monetary compensation. And we will write the monetary compensation between the respondents, and we also will write the risk that was associated with the transfer of the data to have a data theft, okay? We told one guy, give you for your data 30 euros, but I'm sorry, I need to tell you that it might happen in 1 out of 10,000 occasions that your data is stolen. And the next guy, we gave more money and maybe a more secure method of data transfer. And by that, we try to identify what actually is the value of avoiding a risk of data theft. Before that, just 3 minor descriptive outcomes that we got. We asked the people how terribly they would find it if their smart meter data is used by unauthorized people for different purposes, okay? That's like Amazon steals their data and uses it for marketing purposes. And interestingly, well, green should actually tells you a resistance. That's not perfectly chosen color. So I would expect if it's unauthorized, I'm 100% against it. And that would be the answer that I had expected. But what you see is that only 66% find that terrible. The others say, well, I mean, maybe Amazon makes me a great offer, so better they have the information that I don't get that. This even more dramatic is the situation if you ask them, what is if some energy retailer gets access to your data, identifies your load profiles, and makes you a dedicated offer that could be good for you or not? Then almost 50% say, yeah, why not? Even when it's unauthorized, in the worst case, I get an offer that I don't want to accept. Pretty differently is the situation if you tell them, what would you do if unauthorized people take your load profiles and merge them with other data, like your health records and stuff like that? Could be very interesting for insurance companies, of course, because then they may actually know how much your time spent in your home and whether the insurance you have for that is actually adequate. But there, people understand that this is almost for sure against their interests. So what else did we actually find out? Some last key lessons learned. First of all, 70% of our 500 households that we offered money for allowing us to access their data have finally granted us this access. Okay, they have earned by that between 10 and 100 euros. as I said, we override the income, but finally 70% say, yeah, please take it. The average compensation that you would have to pay a household for accept this kind of data transfer is between 10 and 20 euros. So if people tell you that it's terribly important that the data is only with them and definitely not going out of their premises, I find 10 to 20 euros not a lot. So actually, I think that the privacy issue is maybe pushed a bit by groups of people, but that the average person has in the meantime understood that using a mobile phone or an internet or whatever is much more revealing personal interests than energy consumption could actually ever do. We then see quite different patterns between people, like people that do not use Facebook because they are afraid of this kind of uncontrolled information spread, are also very much more concerned about losing their electricity data. And you see some quite other interesting thing in that study that you cannot remember in detail, but they're very important and, well, interesting, and disappointing maybe conclusion is that there are 500 people did not value investments into increased security, okay? Those people that were offered more money or less money to have a higher security standard when their data transfer happens did not show much other answering behavior than the other group. So there is almost no additional willingness to pay to have the personal data secured. And this can either come from because people don't care about their data at all, which I doubt. The other thing that I have pretty much in mind is that the credibility of security measures in the population is actually not too high. We had these Yahoo incidents. We heard that everybody in the meantime has read Hillary's emails and stuff like that. So the credibility of cybersecurity measures isn't too high, and that's why people say I'm not going to pay for any security measures because they won't protect me a lot. So that's actually what I wanted to tell you. So thanks.